Next, an FBI agent goes surfing in a thriller named Point Break.
Think taxpayers would like it, Utah, if they knew that they were paying a federal agent to surf and pick up girls? Babes.
Okay, hot shot. You want to nail the bank robbers and be a big hero?
Definitely.
The ex-presidents are surfers.
Science fiction. Double feature. Dr. X will build a creature. At the late night double feature picture show.
If you're anywhere near my age, you probably remember where you were on May 2nd, 2011. I was perhaps dementedly being driven home by my dad from a screening of crucial cinema experience Hoodwinked 2, Hood vs. Evil, when the national news broke that the US military had successfully completed an operation assassinating Osama bin Laden. Now, I run the risk of glamorizing a lot of really dense politics, as the pervasive war on terror the US trafficked in while Bush and Obama were in office was the genesis for a great deal of nationalism and xenophobia that poisons our nation to this day. With that said, it's hard to understate the rapture taken almost universally in this development.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people
this on TV
and to the world
the other day.
that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children.
We experienced a rare celebration across the left and right, since many perceive this as a sweeping net positive for everyone, that the US had taken a figure off the map that no matter one's views, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone objecting to. As you can imagine, the first auteur to adapt this narrative into a major motion picture would practically have their name written on a slam dunk, and the early bird that clutched that worm was none other than Kathryn Bigelow, who in just less than 2 years after the operation chronicled the event in Zero Dark 30. Deftly timed while the proverbial historic iron was still red hot, it was a huge hit, and Bigelow's own talent shouldn't be understated as a factor in the film's success.
Dudes, Zero Dark 30 was the witch's dick, yo.
Oh my god, dude, when they flew into Osama's compound, it's just like Modern Warfare 2. Except without that German kid calling me a homo.
She and her collaborators walked away with 5 Oscar noms and a win in the division of sound design. But before Bigelow used world history to make film history and beget the irreversible with the earth-shaking, she made movies about bank robbing surfers. I fucking love Point Break.
It's 100% pure adrenaline. Other guys snort for it, jab a vein for it, and all you gotta do is jump.
Point Break had an uphill battle on its hands when it rolled out into theaters in 1991. The tone taken by journalists at the time would indicate that the masses still weren't ingratiated to the idea of a yucky girl directing their action movie.
But women directors would be content with cozy domestic subjects. The career of Kathryn Blue Steel Bigelow must have set them straight. She described her first movie, The Loveless, as biker noir, and followed it with Near Dark, a vampire film called Postmodern by people later found with stakes through their hearts. In her new movie, Point Break, the surfer movie meets Bonnie and Clyde. She uses the, shall we say, Slim story as an excuse to roller coaster cameras from one spectacular action sequence to the next.
It also had an intimidating competition opening against box office juggernaut Terminator 2. Ironically, Bigelow's greatest rival in this particular outing would be her own husband at the time, James Cameron. With all that said, Point Break emerged from this tangle of commercial adversity smelling like a freshly waxed surfboard. It made its budget back almost 4 times over by the end of its run, and there's far worse fates than placing second to the greatest sequel ever made. Despite ending up a success and kickstarting Bigelow's career as we know it today, I find this one is a harder sell than you might think to modern cinephiles. The sort of outlandish premise is a barrier for some, and Keanu is in his post-Theodore Logan reach for more serious acting that's become very in vogue to bash. He does come off a little wooden here, but I don't think this is a misfire like his role in Dracula, where he's just fully miscalibrated.
I know where the bastard sleeps. I brought him there. To Carfax Abbey.
After all, him sounding so out of spirit speaks to the arc of Johnny Utah, his character. He has to choose between the stifling safety of law enforcement and the freedom he sees in sandy beaches and surfing. If he seems inauthentic as a cop, it's because he is.
We don't drink and we sure as hell don't smoke.
Sir, I take the skin off chicken.
Good man.
He was born to embrace ocean spray, not pepper spray. He picked a career backing the blue when he really wants to back the blue. He finds himself torn between waterboarding and waterboarding. Holy moly, these are writing themselves. But who wouldn't be taken in by the peerless charisma of Patrick Swayze, who plays the antagonist, Bodhi? The film opens in the wake of a series of destructive bank robberies caused by a little club of crooks called the Ex-Presidents. The choice to have the main villains be bank robbers donned in uncanny masks shaped in the visage of past US presidents is one of those that feels made out of happenstance, but is woven so well into the film's core message. You've probably seen this parodied a lot, and this is where it all came from. The principal image of the film, in my opinion, is right here. Patrick Swayze in a ghoulish Ronald Reagan mask setting fire to a gas station. The most casual symbol of American commerce being reduced to cinders by someone wearing a latex parody of He Who Begets It. Signed to the case of capturing the ex-presidents is freshly green deputy FBI golden boy Johnny Utah, who's paired with the more gregarious Officer Pappas, played by Gary Busey, who concludes in his very Gary Busey way,
The ex-presidents are surfers.
Surfers.
to infiltrate this radical counterculture, Utah takes up surfing. Never has a fish been so out of water in water. The tightly suspended rookie agent has to contend with sand between his toes and the surprisingly territorial resistance brought on by more seasoned surfers. He finds himself owing a lot to Bodhi, getting close to him and his crew out of suspicion that they're the ex-presidents, a reality Utah fears the closer they get as Bodhi's wisdom and outlook rub off on the federal agent.
It's not tragic to die doing what you love.
It's silly on paper for sure, a clear exploitation of the extreme sports craze of that time. But as unserious as the subject matter of surfing can come off, it's not played for fluff. There's a pretty significant culture of surfing as a means of claiming one's geographical roots. Given coastal areas are often flooded with tourists, even if the whole surfer gang thing is a little overblown here, it's actually a pretty clever thing for a movie to capitalize on. That's not to say it's no nonsense. Gary Busey is a scene stealer for a reason.
Right around that corner, there is a sandwich shop. They sell meatball sandwiches. Best I've ever tasted. Would you?
Utah! Give me two!
It's not just the appeal of surfing that gnaws at Utah the closer he gets to Bodhi and his gang. It's how little he finds himself disagreeing with them. Within the confines of his precinct, the ex-presidents are just yahoos hurting people to fund their endless summer. But when Utah sits around their fire, he begins to understand surfing is what gives their life meaning, a counterculture that gives them a tribe and a place when the rest of the world doesn't. The ex-presidents wear the skins of prior commanders-in-chief, collect money as a sort of proverbial middle finger to authority. They're the embodiment of rejection of everything Johnny Utah defends and works for. And he finds himself resisting push and pull from both sides. Bigelow as a director frequently plays with themes of obsession and how two rivals often only see a fine line between animosity for their opposition and a reliance. As early as Blue Steel, a film where Jamie Lee Curtis plays a police officer chasing a criminal with whom her relationship borders on venomous sexual tension. This carries all the way into Zero Dark 30, focused on the lead played by Jessica Chastain, who is so driven by her singular goal of bringing in Osama that when the job is done, she can only break down in tears, now aimless and devastated with her white whale assassinated. Point Break runs with that dynamic and carries in what I call the I Love You Man action movie canon alongside movies like Face Off. When the golden age of 80s action made every villain a suit or an official to represent sticking it to the man, as we stretch towards the 90s, action movie villains got sexier, and heroes got more susceptible to that. Utah and Bodhi are the most tragic frenemy bromance I can think of. And it's not just the freedom of surfing versus the authority of serving. Bodhi has a code and standards. He's not a greedy lunatic. There's a deep determination and ideals behind his actions, however destructive they may be. I think this is what speaks to Utah, but above the morality of it all, Bodhi arguably has a more of a convicted backbone than the opportunist pigs that wear badges around Utah's office.
This was never about money for us. It was about us against the system. That system that kills the human spirit. We show them that the human spirit is still alive.
This was far from just a broad ideas project from a writing standpoint. Bigelow was an ace with filming equipment as well as a huge innovator. In audio commentaries, she claims to have invented a makeshift pogo cam to film the foot chase scenes in this movie. I had a hard time finding imagery that invoked exactly what Bigelow was describing here, but to my understanding she used the stabilizer of a Steadicam, which is commonly used to capture movement with smaller cameras, attached the way one might in a less professional context use a GoPro during hectic movement, and attached one instead to an 18-pound 35mm device, allowing her and her camera crew to carry a massive detail-oriented camera at a speed that's more conventional for smaller ones, picking up the frenetic bobbing and hectic wobbling of the movie's chase scenes with the same sensitive detail one would turn on an expensive camera for an intimate dialogue scene. What results is a heavy foot race that makes you feel just as dizzy as Johnny Utah and forces you to confront how burning your lungs would have been miles ago if you were in his shoes. There's action of every kind in this movie. Bigelow wanted to rely on stuntmen as little as possible, putting many of the principal actors through surfing lessons with seasoned experts. Patrick Swayze was a kindred spirit in this regard. Following in the footsteps of his own brother, who was a skydiving enthusiast, he mastered the skill for this role, rumored to have practiced north of 50 jumps to assure he wouldn't let anyone else shoulder the responsibility of jumping for him. Set pieces that bounce back and forth from surfing to skydiving sounds beyond parody, I'm aware, but the script writing is actually really smart in how it utilizes these elements. What could easily be an extremely goofy movie-style riff on the X Games style sports is used for mind games. I love this bit where Utah joins the ex-presidents for a skydive, and the different members of the gang, all holding Utah in different levels of skepticism here, pass around and revoke different parachute bags, pumping up the suspicion you share with Utah over the criminals holding him as sort of a captive audience.
Why don't you take young grommets here? How'd that be?
Nah, you don't want this one, man. This one's set for a neck breaker. You're probably better off something like this. You're gonna jump or jerk off.
That's my man.
Swayze and Keanu's chemistry really bubbles during these skydive ascents. Outside of a kick-ass set piece to fill that action bill, it's a terrific illustration as Utah and Bodhi, at odds at this point in the story, play chicken with the cord of their shared parachute and weigh their animosity over their self-preservation, and how their muddled friendship causes those to overlap. For the serious ingenuity it took to make this movie, you'd think it would be held in pretty great esteem, even for a movie about cops and robbers who split their time between heists and surfing. But it's honestly kind of a joke in a lot of circles, to the point that it survived largely by Point Break Live in our modern zeitgeist. This is a stage show reenactment of Point Break in which the role of Johnny Utah is played by an oblivious audience member at every production. Said audience member reads all their lines off of cue cards to capture the je ne sais quoi of Keanu's performance.
They control the room well, and they stick strictly to the cast drawers. They don't go for the vaults?
I'm sure this is largely in good fun. Gary Busey and Keanu have even acknowledged the production. I just kind of roll my eyes out of anything that goes to huge certain extents just to take the piss out of something. I think no matter how savagely you dig at something, you do love it on a certain level if you can bear to engage with it over years and years. If you asked me to make a stage show about a movie I truly hate, I think I would sooner eat glass. Still, there will always be poor faith readers that can't see that and are anxious to parrot the aspects that are just poking fun. Even if this movie isn't your thing, I defy you to poke fun at the grand finale, the sequence that really boosted the movie into one of my all-time favorites. Utah finds Bodhi once and for all, and with no guns or masks or surfboards or skydiving parachutes, the two have one last harrowing fight in the rain, their feet sinking into cold, damp sand, where they resolve to settle their beef once and for all. I won't spoil what the final payoff is, but it kinda left me in awe. A perfect statement to define both characters in the crescendo of their story, their rivalry, and their friendship. This might be overselling what's ultimately still the surfing cop movie, but I have to own up, it wears its badge on its sleeve, and Bigelow rocketed down to earth with bold ideas, whether her parachute worked or not. And I'll take an endeavor like that over a big hit hailed as a masterpiece with its safety nets deployed any day of the week.
Continue.